Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're going to talk a lot about heat stress and wonderful information that can help firefighters today. Throughout the webinar, we will have your opportunity to ask questions, but we want you to hold those questions to the end, and we will address them through the chat. So you can put them through the chat, and we'll get to the end of the webinar. We'll discuss those questions with you. Make sure you have your audio set correctly on your computer where you can hear well. You might want to adjust your background noise as far as shutting off things that may distract you. And for those of you who are interested in sharing this or reviewing the webinar after the fact, it is being recorded. It will be sent out after the webinar to those who have registered. So we appreciate you taking your time. This time is the most important gift we have because we can't make any more time. So with that, we'll get started. So my name is Andy Starnes. I have been in the fire service since I was a kid. Started chasing my father around since I was around 8, 9 years old in the volunteer fire service in a little town called Sandy Ridge, North Carolina, outside of Monroe. Became a junior firefighter at age 13, got a career firefighter at age 22. Hard to think back that far. Joined the Charlotte Fire Department at that age and recently retired from there last October after 25 years of service. So I've been at this a little while. Doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. I'm a lifelong student. And during that time frame, I was, my father was my motivation, inspiration, and I got into a project called Project Kill the Flashover, which led to me into my thermal imaging journey, which started in 2015 after being with Kill the Flashover for 5 years. And I started studying heat specifically, which is why I'm so focused on talking about what we're going to talk about today. My background is in thermography, which is the non-contact or remote measurement of heat. And we're going to talk about how heat affects you, the firefighter, and how we can manage that. I've been fortunate to be around a lot of wonderful people and pray that it rubs off on me as far as their wisdom and expertise and experience. I have a cadre of over 12 instructors now, and I was fortunate enough to be inducted into Hall of Legends, Legacies, and Leaders at FDIC last year. That special meaning to me because my father was inducted the year before. His health was failing. I was able to bring him to the ceremony and hand him my plaque. Because of him, I am where I am today. So hopefully many of you who are joining here in the fire service today think about those who've invested in you. I hope that you turn around and do the same for others. So with that being said, let's get started. So we're going to talk about heat stress. Heat stress affects everyone, from the citizen to the firefighter. There's nothing we can do as far as heat's going to happen in our world. And if you haven't paid attention, the world's getting a little warmer. And some of us who live in certain places have to deal with more heat. We're going to talk about heat stress, specifically how it affects the firefighter, how the gear works, and how we can manage certain aspects of that. So heat stress affects everyone from the recruit to the senior veteran. One of the things we need to be aware of, though, is when we report to work as a firefighter with your career, volunteer combination, or someone like myself who does training, you need to make sure that you're at your best. The majority of firefighters who report to duty are already dehydrated. And I'm the world's worst because I love to drink coffee. But if our body's 70% water and we're already dehydrated when we report to work, we're already at a disadvantage. So no matter what gear we wear at that point, it's like showing up to work with a quarter tank of fuel and you got a long way to go. Make sure that you're taking care of your body and you're properly hydrated, because just as little as 2% dehydration can have major impacts on, as far as negative impacts and performance on your body. So we want to make sure that the body is ready for battle. And we'll talk about a lot to do to help you with that. But in general, heat stress affects firefighters in many ways. But you got to think about this. You're already in a physically demanding job. And now we're putting on gear that in many cases limits our movement and limits our body's ability to regulate temperature. So the better that gear is, the better it fits, the better it relieves heat stress and helps us work together. It's almost like having another layer of skin. We want this to work with us, not against us. The better that is, the better we'll be able to perform. So heat stress, when a firefighter goes to work, what's not studied in many cases is you just getting on the fire truck and putting on the turnout gear and going to the call, you're already sweating. You could be running numerous calls throughout the day wearing gear where you sweat. That's why Fire-Dex is produced two different types of gear, one for non-fire activities and one for fire activities. I recommend you having an extra set, because if you run a lot of calls and you're already sweating all day long, it's like my friends in Texas and what they deal with, their fire gear is saturated with sweat. They need to have dry gear that's cool and not preheated. So when your gear is being stored, make sure it's cool. It's got fans blowing on it. And you're not laying it on the engine housing. And if you have the opportunity to wear some like Fire-Dex offers a non-traditional set of gear that's for extrication and medical calls, wear that instead, because you want to limit the amount of heat stress on your body. Because you put that gear on, take it off, put it on, take it off 10, 12 times, and then you finally go to the actual fire, your gear is already preheated, saturated with water from you sweating, and you're at a disadvantage. So heat stress is going to affect us no matter what we do. But how we manage heat stress is through a couple different ways, which we'll discuss. I want you to understand, though, as we move forward throughout this, my passion is to get firefighters home. I want you to be able to do your job, what I call intelligently aggressive, get in, do your job, and get home to your family. And a common theme that we see each year is the majority of fire grounds and firefighter deaths have to do with cardiac stress, overexertion, and stress. 51% of us die due to this. And 51% of those deaths occur on something we do 1% of the time, which is working on the fire ground. You see this firefighter wearing the turnout gear, has got a tool in their hand, and they're working to pull ceiling or whatever they may be doing. That's a lot of work. It's physically demanding, number one. But you're wearing gear that in many cases limits your ability to move. And when you wear this gear, whether we like it or not, we're going to sweat. Some of us sweat more than others, which we'll discuss. But if we are already at a disadvantage, we're dehydrated, we're not taking care of ourselves, we're putting our body under cardiac stress. And you could have a cardiac event within 24 hours of an actual fire. That's why many of the line of duty deaths we see are happening as late as 24 hours after it. But 51% of those deaths were due to overexertion and stress. Another thing that firefighters have to face, if you look at crashes and struck by vehicles, that's a large percentage of firefighters dying by basically being out and about, driving to and from the calls, and being on the roadway. It's one of the most dangerous places they can be. So please be careful out there. That was one of my least favorite places to be, was being on the interstate. One of the things I'm passionate about is helping firefighters see the bad things before they happen to them, which is Dr. Gasaway's quote. I love that quote. I give full credit to him. But seeing things like rapid fire progress before it becomes what it is. We want to give them the ability to see the bad things and stop them. Structure collapse. That happens a lot, sadly. And then 4% of firefighters die due to objects falling and striking them. One of the things that's most not commonly known is 56% of injuries happen to firefighters outside of the burning building. So just because you step outside the building doesn't mean you're safe. You may be tired. Make sure you're paying attention, because a lot of times firefighters fall. Sadly, we've read about that, injuries and death, firefighters falling off roofs and other areas, and 6% of deaths were due to other reasons. But in general, the biggest threat we face is heat stress, overexertion that leads to cardiac incidents. This is from 2022 NFPA line of duty death statistics and firefighter deaths by cause of injury. So what contributes to heat stress? Let's talk about some things we can control. Number one, how about our physical fitness? If we're all honest with ourselves, physical fitness is like marriage. We're either getting better or getting worse. We have to be constantly working on ourselves, taking care of ourselves. And it doesn't get any easier as you age. So exercise is something we have to do. We're not saying everyone has to be Mr. or Mrs. Olympia, but we have to exercise. And one of the things I think that the majority of us would all agree on is we could eat better. Someone who travels a lot, I understand the struggles of this. We could eat healthier, exercise more, get regular checkups. A lot of people are not fans of the NFPA consensus standard, but I will tell you that getting yourself checked, preventive checks, regular checks, it's better to find a problem early than late. Is one of the points we'll talk about is what firefighters weren't aware of when they passed away. And then making sure we're drinking enough water, and it's not just water. We need electrolytes. A lot of the studies are showing that you can drink all the water you want, but we're missing out on valuable things such as electrolytes. So if you're adding that to that, make sure you do. And make sure you're getting proper checkups and making sure that you're okay. If you're not feeling well, make sure you get looked at. A lot of firefighters ignore that. Another big issue for most of us is something that some of us can control and some of us can't, is our body composition. Some of us are naturally bigger people as far as our height and frame, and some of us are smaller. That we can't control. But our overall muscle frame, muscle mass, how much muscle we have, how much body fat, that's something we can control if we work at it, just like physical fitness. So that can affect how much we heat up. It also affect how much we sweat. I don't know about you, but I probably sweat more than most people. I always joke, say that I had more sweat glands than the average person. As I mentioned before, one of the most common things that they point out in these line of duty deaths that where firefighters die due to cardiac issues is as much as 30% of them did not know that they had a cardiovascular problem, a heart problem, and the autopsy revealed they had an enlarged heart. They had a blockage they weren't aware of. Sadly, my own department experienced that, and I was recently at a training incident where a firefighter said, "I don't feel well. I'm going to go get checked out." And he ended up with, a very serious heart issue, and thankfully was able to get it fixed. But he had no signs or symptoms leading up to that. Please do regular checkups, because you are working in one of the most dangerous environments you can work in, and you're wearing gear that's physically taxing on your body. No matter what gear you're wearing, it's going to wear you out at some point. So you want to have better gear that helps you breathe better, help you feel better, and reduce that cardiac stress. One of the things we can't control is where we live unless you choose to move. So hotter environments like Alaska versus Texas. My friends in Texas, Florida, Louisiana, Arizona, God bless them. In the summertime, I can't imagine what they're dealing with. I visited some of these fire stations when it's over 100 degrees outside, and it was almost 100 degrees in the bay. That's a pretty tough environment to work in, day out. And then if you're wearing overbuilt, bulky turnout gear that doesn't fit you well and doesn't breathe well, you're already at a disadvantage. I think one of the big things that I've been proud of is being a part of organizations such as Fire-Dex that help innovate products. And one of the things that innovation does is it challenges paradigms. Firefighters need to understand that your gear needs to protect you, but it needs to work with you. And if it protects you, but actually causes you problems, that's not working with you. So if you're already in these things here, you need to have something that benefits you, doesn't limit your movement, and gives you better breathability, so that when you face heat stress, which you will, it will give you a better chance of higher performance and being better on the fire ground and getting home to your family. Let's talk about how that affects the body. A lot of my friends do a lot of reading and studying and teaching about stress inoculation. You can look at Dr. Grossman's work. You can look at Cooper's Colors. You can read about critical incident stress management, where it talks about the effects of increased heart rate. As your heart rate goes up, your performance goes down. But very few talk about what happens when your core temperature goes up. And these numbers are for some recent studies that you can look at. And I want you to pay special attention to how small the increase is, but how big the negative impact is. So at 98.6 degrees, we're all fine, normal operating temperature, but with barely, not even a full 1 degree increase, we're already at auditory impairment. We're not even at 100 degrees, 99.5. We're already starting not to hear well. You're in one of the most challenging environments there is, wearing gear that encapsulates you, where it is already hard to hear. And now my body's shutting down and I can't hear. That's not good. I want to regulate my temperature and reduce that if possible. And just slightly over that, not even at 101 degrees yet, 100.2, we're seeing motor impairment. It's like a sluggish car. If you've ever had really, really sore muscles and couldn't move very fast, you understand what motor impairment is. We're not able to do these movements and tasks very fast. We're slowing down. We have seen firefighters on the fire ground after one evolution or one live fire, one bottle, they're already at this temperature. And just barely above that, not even at 101 degrees, we're already at cognitive impairment. What does that mean? We're not able to think clearly, not make good decisions. That's a terrible place to be in an environment where you can't control all of the variables. You need to think clearly under stress and be able to make good decisions quickly. Well, if you can't hear and your muscles are slowed down, you can't think, you're already at a disadvantage. So we need to think twice about wearing gear that increases our temperature so much to protect us from an environment that we can't even hear, see, function, or think in. So make sure that you look at this as an advantage. By controlling your body temperature and controlling temperatures around you, you can do better. Whereas obviously if we go up to 104 degrees, we're at heat stroke, which can be fatal. We don't want that to occur. But these are some numbers you want to consider, that how quickly your body temperature can increase by working on the fire ground, which we're going to talk about different aspects outside the fire ground, how that increases your temperature as well. So these 3 studies from Rossi, Smith, and Eglin talk about where they take recruits, career firefighters, and instructors, And they put them to work and they tested them. Now think about this. They had recruits doing 15-minute work cycles. Now think about most recruits, younger, more in shape. They had a 1 degree core temperature increase. 1 degree. You already said, okay, at 1 degree, I can't hear well. We say young people can't hear us or don't listen to us today. Well, that might be part of your problem. I'll look at that as teenager research later because I have a teenager to talk to. But when you talk about career firefighters, 3 6-minute work cycles, like almost like if you look at interval training, those of you into CrossFit, 6-minute work, then some rest. Their core temperature went up 2.5 degrees. They're in trouble. 6-minute work cycles. Think about that. Intense work cycle and rest. Intense work cycle and rest. 2.5 degrees. Small increases, big impacts on your health, your heart, your ability to perform. Whereas instructors, and I take this personally because this is what I do for a living, are often in and out of these buildings for extended periods of time. And if you are a teacher in your own department, you understand that a lot of times you don't have that many instructors. One didn't show up, they didn't pay for them, whatever it may be. But after 40 minutes, you're almost at a 2-degree core temperature increase. And I want you to look at this highlighted thing at the bottom of the slide here. This is pretty impactful. Those of us who teach are often the ones who get hurt. 8 out of 13 instructors had a core temperature of over 102 degrees. We were in Texas recently, and Texas is not a cool place during the summer. It was in May. One live burn, one of our ignition officers, after approximately 8 minutes in that burn building, had a core temperature of 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And he's sitting over there, obviously profusely sweating, said he's fine, but we're going to talk about why we're not necessarily fine. Because how you feel is not necessarily how you are. Fine is one of my most hated words in the English language. Whether you're dealing with behavioral health or you're not feeling well, firefighters are the world's worst at telling the truth about how they feel. You may say you're fine, but you're not. When I mentioned earlier, a lot of firefighter line of duty deaths is within that 24-hour window, which we're seeing today. They're finding out that firefighters are having cardiac incidents, heart attacks after they go home because that what happened to them on the fire ground affects them later. So if you think you feel fine, but you're really hot and your vitals say otherwise, you need to listen to the people who are taking like the numbers on your body. Like if you look at your car, you got a fuel gauge, you got a temperature gauge, you got an oil gauge. That's telling you what's really going on with the car. It may sound fine, but it's not. So pay attention to when they take your vitals and say, hey, you're not fine. Your EKG says this. You're dehydrated. You need a bag of fluid. So make sure you understand that because that 24-hour danger window is a real thing. Read about how many firefighters went home and then sadly passed away within 24 hours of an actual structure fire, house fire incident they had. So as I mentioned earlier, getting those regular checkups are a big deal. Because when I had mine, my epiphany was in 2016. I had no idea. I started feeling a little funny, went and had everything looked at. They showed me the left side of my heart was enlarged. When you have an enlarged heart with thickened heart walls, you don't feel that big heart attack till it's too late. So go get checked out. It's a big deal. And then another thing people don't consider is slips, trips, and falls are a major contributor to fireground injuries and firefighter injuries in general. But let's be honest. You put on bulky, overbuilt gear, you work really hard, you're tired, you come out, your core temperature is elevated. Could you easily slip, trip, or fall if you're not paying attention? Yeah. So your core temperature and the gear you wear can contribute to your injuries, not just deaths, but injuries. If it doesn't fit you well, your boots don't fit right, your gear doesn't fit right. So I'm very, very fond of Fire-Dex gear fits me well. They do a good job of making sure that gear fits you. And one thing you may not have the luxury of is this other bullet point. You need to quit in time. Don't wear out your firefighters. However, with 1.2 million firefighters in the United States and 900,000 of them being a combination of volunteer, one of my instructors department has first due with 3 and 12 minutes before other people get there. They may come out, need a break, and not get one. So your physical fitness, hydration, being able to do interval training, get back in there and recover quickly is a big deal. But if you don't have someone to rehab you and get a break and go in and relieve you, then you need to also be in shape, be better, and have gear that helps you recover faster and stay cooler. The other 3 things that we talk about as far as the incidents we face that are actual fire related is live fire incidents versus overhaul versus training. Obviously, live fire, you're going to experience heat stress. But if we're honest with ourselves, the majority of firefights are short. Unless you're dealing with bigger incidents, they are 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, one bottle. and then you're outside. Where the real work kicks in is during overhaul. I always laugh that people say, I'm a firefighter, love to fight fire, and then overhaul occurs and they suddenly disappear. I'm like, where's your no fear sticker now that we've got to pull all this lath and plaster out of this 2,000 square foot house? That's demanding work while wearing gear that limits your body's ability to breathe and increasing your core temperature and wearing you out. Then you got to go back, get cleaned up, get your stuff ready for the next one. Versus training. A lot of people are not aware of this, but as many as 7,000 firefighters get burned in training incidents each year. Not real incidents, but training. How many of those incidents result in firefighters going to the hospital for overheating, heat stroke, and death? Sadly, we've seen this already happen this year where firefighters have passed away training from various circumstances. But you can get hot when it's training. And those of you who train all the time, that's awesome. But keep in mind that if it's 100-something degrees outside, your training window might need to change. It might need to be early in the morning or late in the evening. So the dangers of heat stress cannot be overemphasized because you're already going to face it. You don't need to go ahead and add extra risk to it. I'm not saying don't work out. I'm not saying don't be prepared. But if it's 103 degrees outside, then maybe that's not the time for you to put on your turnout gear and go train. And that brings us to what we're here to talk about today, which is the word breathability. Some of you who study turnout gear or on committees may be aware of all the different acronyms in NFPA 1971, but in my opinion, very few are aware of RET. RET is how the gear breathes. The technical definition is resistance to evaporated heat transfer. Fire-Dex labels it as resistance to evaporated heat loss. Fancy way of saying is, does the gear breathe well or does it not breathe well? And it's rated differently than some of the other numbers you've seen, like TPP and THL. Typically, the higher the number, the better the performance of that particular variable that they're grading. RET is the inverse. The lower the number, the better the gear breathes. And that's what we want. Any of those of you who like to exercise probably have your favorite type of clothing you wear when you work out. You don't want something that sticks to you, chafes you, and makes you get hot. You want something that breathes well and wicks that moisture away from you. Well, it's important to consider that because RET is already used as a measurement in athletic attire. They've already been using this. And our friends overseas, who are often smarter than us in many ways, use something called EN 469, and that standard includes RET. RET is not currently in NFPA 1971, but is being considered to be included. So what does it really mean? The lower the number, the better the gear breathes. And it's already being used in several industries and our friends overseas. So it's imperative you understand it. If Fire-Dex has already looked at this because they're not just doing the minimum standard, they're looking ahead of the standard, looking ahead for these things for you. Because like I said, got to challenge the paradigm, challenge the status quo, build better gear that makes it healthier for you, keeps your fatigue lowered if possible, reduces cardiac stress, and allows you to live a longer, healthier life. And the effects of RET are pretty amazing compared to THL, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So it's a better breathability, which means sweat can evaporate faster. Those of you who may have been wrestlers in the past or seen people do extreme weight loss, you've seen people put a plastic trash bag over their body, cut holes in it. They get on a treadmill and put a sweatshirt on and run, and they lose a ton of water weight. However, that's extremely dangerous. So keep in mind why that plastic bag did not let the water transfer through. And it's not good for your heart because if sweat can't evaporate, your body can't cool. But if it can evaporate, it does leave your body cooler. It's almost like a fan blowing across you. You see this little diagram, you can see the sweat moving through the 3 layers of the composite out of the gear, away from you, and not allowing bad stuff in. Where if you have a higher RET, which is a non-breathable composite, that traps the heat and moisture in, just like that plastic bag on the person running on the treadmill who's desperately trying to lose weight. That's not the right way to do it. That's an extreme way, which has extreme results. So RET versus THL. As our firefighters are pictured here moving up the stairs, even though they look nice and clean here, I can assure you, you put on turnout gear and start moving, you're going to sweat. It's like wearing winter clothes during summer. You are going to sweat profusely. You can lose as much as a quart of water per hour out of your body. It's a big deal. But total heat loss is what NFPA measures as far as what they thought was how well that heat and vapor could escape. But it doesn't tell the whole story. So your minimum on a THL should be 205. So the higher the number, you would think, oh, that's better breathability. However, it doesn't tell you the whole story, because you can have a high THL but poor RET ratings. You're like, well, why is that? Well, if you look in depth about THL, total heat loss, they took diamond plating, a piece of diamond plating, and a plastic bag, and both of those passed the THL test for NFPA. Now, would you want to wear a plastic bag under your turnout gear or have diamond plating up against your skin? Do you think that's going to be breathable? No. So RET is looking to be included in the next edition of NFPA 1971. So that places Fire-Dex ahead of the curve, looking towards the future, making better gear for you, so that looking after your future, because whether you like it or not, your job is inherently dangerous and hazardous to your health. And the way we can reduce these hazards is building better products for the people that wear them, and training them and keeping them in shape and giving them every opportunity to get home to their family. And this gear will help you do that, as we talk about a little bit more what that means for you. One of the studies that points out the importance of breathability is pretty powerful. If you're into reading research papers, one of these days I'm going to start reading regular books. All I do is read research papers. It's one of my retirement goals of those of you who love books. But NC State has a ton of great research papers you can look at, and they've done a lot of work in the garment industry, especially specifically for firefighters. This particular study, 10 firefighters wore different composites, different types of gear, with different breathability ratings. The interesting thing about it was that they all had similar THL scores, but very different RET. That meant it looked like they were good in the THL score, but the RET score said a different story. 4 of the firefighters were pulled from the study when wearing the non-breathable higher RET composite. You think about that. They stopped them, but yet when they put them in a good breathable composite with a lower RET, they were able to safely complete the trial while wearing the gear with greater breathability. What does that tell you? If it's same firefighter wearing gear that allows my body to breathe and do what it naturally does, I'm able to work longer with my vitals being within normal limits and evaporate sweat and allow me to feel better. However, when they were wearing the non-breathable high RET composite, their body core temperature increased during the rest cycles. So one of my pet peeves is to see firefighters on the fire ground when they're resting, sitting over there wearing all of their stuff, not letting their body do what it should do. I don't care what gear you're wearing. If you're taking a break, get out of the gear if possible. Let your body do what it's supposed to do. If you got fans over there, cool those people off, cool the gear off, dry it off. So if I have a higher RET, a non-breathable composite, I'm placing higher cardiac strain on you and myself and those around me. So fire chiefs, those who are making purchases, I need you to pay special attention to this. Line of duty deaths are due to cardiac stress and heat and overexertion. You want to reduce this, you need to focus on getting better gear on your firefighters that helps them feel better and puts less stress on their heart. Firefighters are already under stress anyway, because these firefighters who did this test were pulled from the test when they were wearing the non-breathable composite, not because they wanted to quit, not because they felt bad, but because the researchers said, your vitals are out of whack. You're stopping. You heard that? They didn't quit. They were made to quit. That's what firefighters do. They don't quit when they should. Like I said, stop when you need to. Make sure you're not wearing out your firefighters. These guys and gals didn't ask to quit. They were told to quit. So this is important data, because just like Maydays, we don't call them until the last minute. We're not telling people we're in trouble until we're past in trouble. So that brings us to the really important part of this presentation, was talking about how this gear will help you. I'm not a salesperson. I'm going to tell you up front. I wear products because I believe in products, and I test products. If I don't believe in them, you don't see them on me. I've been wearing TechGen 1971 since 2019. And Aeroflex is pretty darn impressive. And we're going to talk about why that's impressive and why it's going to help you. Because it's designed to do something a lot of gear doesn't do, which is tackle heat stress from the inside out while not sacrificing thermal protective performance to your firefighters. You got to deal with the heat on the outside, but few deal with the heat on the inside. So how does it do that? If you look at your gear, and if you've worked out really hard, whatever you're wearing, you've noticed your body sweats more in certain areas. And you sweat underarms, sides, and groins areas. So this breathable 3-layer composite has those areas where they have vents, or what they call vapor-like panels. It allows that heat to come out, because typically that heat is encapsulated. If you see in this picture here, you got your outer shell, your moisture barrier, and your thermal liner. You're looking at your thermal liner, you see a little flap there. That allows that sweat to evaporate. There's your moisture barrier, and there's your thermal liner. You notice the panel is black. That's where the vapor-like panel is. It allows that heat to come out. And if you're moving, it actually works better, which is pretty amazing. Here's a better diagram. For those of you who like to look at diagrams like me, I have to see it to believe it. You can see the shadowed areas of the turnout coat where those actual vapor-like panels are. And it gives you a lower RET number. The standard RET numbers you see on the market are 19 to 22. Where you're looking at vapor-like panels, you're seeing them as low as 15 with super high THL too. So this really makes a difference in how you feel, cooling your body off, reducing fatigue, reducing cardiac stress. So these composites are giving them the best ratings in the industry compared to any other gear out there. How does it work? It's like a one-way valve. Those of you who are hazmat techs, or what I call hazmagicians, you understand one-way valve and pressure relief valves. It's allowing that moisture and heat to escape through those 3 layers, allowing your body to cool off without allowing bad stuff in. It's pretty important, because a lot of people say, if it's letting stuff out, what is it letting in? And that's a good point. It has particulate blocking technology in the vents to act as a barrier to stop potentially harmful carcinogens, which we don't want any more exposure to cancer than we're already getting. And I must stress, if you are in the job, whether you're training, whether you're active, or you're retired, whatever you're doing, make sure you're deconning. Get the stuff off, do your gross decon, use fire wipes, flame soap, whatever it is you use. Get your gear clean. And if you're blessed to have 2 sets of turnout gear, get out of that gear, get your second set in service, and get that gear washed. Change your hoods out on a regular basis, because even though this stuff may cool you off faster, if it's dirty, you don't need to put dirty gear back on. But these vents are positioned with those panels in the armpits and the inner thighs, because that's typically where most of the body's, most of your sweat accumulates. And this is a great video with a Seek thermal camera of an LA County firefighter walking on a treadmill. And we're going to use the color palette where blue is the coldest and red is the hottest. As you can see in this demonstration, he's just simply walking on a treadmill. His hands are hot because the hands are exposed, but the areas that are the hottest are exactly where those vapor-like panels are placed, underneath the armpits, around down of his side, and in the groin area. The cool thing about this, pun intended, is it generates a constant cooling sensation by promoting airflow through dynamic movement. In other words, if you're active, it increases air circulation. So it gives you a cooling experience. So when are you not active? When you're sitting in the truck or sitting in rehab. But most of the time in the fire ground, whether it's fighting the fire, overhaul, or outside cleaning up, you are active. So this gives you an actual benefit that most gear does not. It's moving air, evaporating sweat, doing what your body normally does, because you are actively moving. And that's what you need, is a gear that works with your body, not against it. So I love this video. Of course, you know me, I'm a thermal imaging nerd. So anytime I can add a tick video to something, I'm going to. So thanks to LA County and Fire-Dex and Seek for putting this video in here. So what has Fire-Dex done to go above the curve? Obviously, we mentioned about RET. We mentioned what NC State has done. That video you saw was part of the testing on Airflex. But I want you to see what they've done with independent testing. Florida State University did some pretty amazing tests on this gear to show you the difference. And if you're familiar with these test mannequins, there's one called Pyroman they use for flame testing. Well, this mannequin is really interesting. His name is Andy, A-N-D-I. Thought, well, that's funny. Andy's doing the webinar. Andy's the sweat mannequin. This mannequin is designed to test fabrics based on sweat. It has numerous zones on it where it pumps water into the mannequin and it sweats through, and it measures that. And it also measures core temperature. Well, this mannequin moves. So Florida State University did an independent test to simulate overhaul activities. You know, the fun stuff, pulling ceiling, carrying stuff out, moving furniture, all that stuff, right? 75 minutes of activity. I don't know about you, but I'm not working 75 minutes straight. I'm doing interval training. I'm going to give you 20, take a break, 20, take a break. But they tested 2 different sets of turnout gear with identical composites with one difference. One was Airflex and one was standard gear. and they track core temperatures and sweat rates, the things that people are not paying attention to that you need to be aware of. What were the results? Aeroflex consistently resulted in lower core temperatures and lower sweat rates than other gear. Remember in the beginning, I said small temperature increases result in very bad performance things to us. It decreases our performance. It limits our ability to hear. It slows us down as far as our muscle movements. And then it affects our ability to think. So if I can reduce my core temperature by just a small amount, I can increase my overall performance and safety. These were controlled lab tests, but they show generally how the gear might perform in the real world. The mannequin imitates sweating and body temperature. And like I said, it was a 75-minute simulated overhaul activity. So you had lower core temperatures overall and lower sweat rates. Well, my dad and I are big data guys. We always say best chart wins. So here's a couple charts for the data guys and gals out there. So this core temperature chart shows from normal temperature all the way up to heat stroke, 105 degrees. The black line is the regular composite. The orange line is the Aeroflex composite. Almost a degree difference if you look at that. Remember what I said, a small increase equals a big decrease in your performance and bad stuff happening to you. So if we can lower your core temperature just by a half degree or a degree, it makes a huge difference in how your body's going to perform and how you're going to feel, your overall health and safety, and your ability to live longer, healthier lives. So there's those data we saw from the beginning. It all ties together now. Auditory impairment right around 99 degrees, motor impairment right at 100 degrees, cognitive impairment right around 101 degrees, heat stroke at 104. But if we can reduce that just by a degree and cool off faster, and if, God forbid, we get a break, we could actually reduce this even further. So there's your timestamps at the bottom from 0 minutes all the way up to 71 minutes. What the mannequin did was a 75-minute test. And then the big one was sweat rate, how much moisture is coming off. And if you notice, it is decreased in the orange line, which is the Aeroflex. So looking at grams per minute, anywhere from 0 to up 30 grams per minute. Remember, you can sweat a quart an hour as a firefighter. Most research shows that's a lot of water coming off your body. You can't replace that fast enough. And that was right at the max sweat rate was right at 30 minutes. So how many of you work for 30 minutes on the fire ground? Most of you. 10, 15 minutes on your firefighting, and then a lot longer for overhaul, and then cleaning up and getting back to station and starting all over again. Your body's going to sweat. You need to rehydrate. You need rest. You need to make sure you're wearing gear that breathes and works with you, not against you. So less sweat, less risk of dehydration, but not just less sweat. But when that sweat happens, which is going to happen to all of us, is your gear breathable so your body can do its job? What was my experience with this? Like I said, I've been very blessed to be involved in certain organizations that allow me to test products, because here's my purpose. My purpose is to get you home to your families. A lot of people are focused on different skills and different things. I understand that. But my world is I work in the dark. I either work in the dark of the fire or the dark of the human heart. I'm behavioral health or infrared. Where I'm at is I want firefighters to be able to do their job and get home to their family. So one of the reasons we chose to work with Fire-Dex back in 2019 was I needed a gear that allowed my firefighters to work but feel better. And I used to wear a very thick, overbuilt set of turnout gear that I felt terrible at the end of the day. And when we switched over to Fire-Dex Tech Gen 71, we feel much better. So when they gave me the test Aeroflex set over a year ago, before anyone knew about it, I was skeptical. I was like, how can this be better than what I already got? It's going to be lighter. It's going to have vents in it. I was like, oh boy. So I'm one of those people. Don't believe me, go test it. I wore this gear around the world in different places. And as a thermal imaging instructor, we don't always put out the fire. We let it burn and we do multiple rotations. So I took it in places it probably shouldn't have went. And I can tell you that I cooled off faster, I felt better, and I was shocked, because I'm a natural born skeptic. And I've worn this gear numerous times, hundreds of different scenarios. It's performed exceptionally well. And as a 49-year-old fire training instructor, I need every advantage I can get to stay, up with all the young people, number one. And I need to get home to my family. I don't need to have a cardiac incident while doing training, like we talked about earlier. So for me, it's a game changer. Anything that helps me be healthier and keeps me refreshed it gives me a little bit more energy so I can have a little bit more edge on those young guys I work with, I'm all for it. But this gear is a game changer for me. And as I tell people with thermal imaging cameras, don't believe me. Go test it out yourself. You buy a car, you test drive it. Make sure your department does their homework, has a spec, talks to different gear manufacturers, and get this gear and put it to work. Put your people who are going to wear it in that test group, not the fire chief, the people, your rescue, your engine, your ladder company. Put them to work, the things you do normally, and see how they feel. Monitor their vitals, get your own test data, and see what you think about it. Because for me, I can tell you that my utmost priority is to get firefighters home to their families, and my second family is my instructor cadre. So I have to get them home to their families. So we're very focused on them wearing the best gear they can wear. It's up to date, it's clean, it's not damaged, and it allows them to put less stress on their body because they're still on the job and I'm not. So I know what put stress on the human body, and I know what firefighters go through, and I want to make things better for you. So if you have questions or anything we can do for you, we will take those questions now. You can also send me an email at andystarnes@instructorandystarnes.com if you want to talk offline. Be glad to. Shannon, I'll let you throw any questions from the chat room at me now, if you will.
Sure. So our first one is asking if using an infrared non-touch thermometer, how far are we missing the actual core temperature?
It doesn't measure the core temperature. That's a great question. It's just showing infrared spot thermometers are different than standard fire service cameras. Number one, infrared spot thermometers are designed to measure temperatures within a very short distance within a certain level of accuracy. Depending on which one you have, if you have an X-Tech one, if you're standing straight in line with the target within the distance to spot ratio, you can get a plus or minus average accuracy of the surface of what you're measuring, plus or minus half a degree, depending on what it is. Most of them are about 5 degrees. Core temperature ratings need to have like actual meters on the human body. What you're seeing with most of these is just heat loss, showing how much heat. Like if you saw the one video we showed with the seat camera, that was a qualitative measurement showing patterns of heat, not showing the exact measurement. Those exact measurements were done with actual sensors on the body. That's a great question.
Great. So our next one is, can you address extra thermal enhancements in gear, and do you feel they are necessary if you are doing a proper fire attack?
Well, that's a great question, and I'll try to shorten my answer. My biggest complaint against the fire service right now is overprotecting firefighters without educating them on why you need so much more protection. It's like having thermal imaging cameras that read 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit versus one that reads 1,200 degrees. You don't need a camera that sees 2,000 degrees. All of them are qualitative in nature. You add thermal enhancement to your gear, you need to consider this quote from Al Huxley. What science has actually done is given us better ways to get killed. If you keep insulating your firefighters where they can't feel anything, in an environment they can't see anything, eventually bad things are going to happen. Fire behavior training and teaching them to control the environment is the answer, not building thicker gear that keeps protecting them because the environment's getting worse. What we need to increase is overall education, identify those threats and mitigate the threat. If we could teach firefighters to control the environment, you would see this gear become standardized across the world, because my friends overseas are already wearing lighter gear because they already do this. We, on the other hand, continue to improve our uniforms and fail to improve our understanding. Because if you look at curriculum, less than 1% of firefighter training is dedicated to fire behavior. That's like going to a doctor who spent 1% of his time studying the human body. It's a bad idea. We need to improve our understanding of fire behavior, fire attack, control the environment, and then we can improve our overall paradigm of how our gear should be built. I'm not saying there shouldn't be overbuilt gear for specific things like ARF or hazmat incidents, but day-to-day firefighting gear should be ergonomic, lighter weight, with better breathability, because in the end, you are going to be physically taxed by the job you do. You want a gear that makes you feel better or worse and limits your ability to work, should be the question. Great question, though.
Great. Our next one says, can you discuss your thoughts on durability of gear versus breathability?
I will tell you that there are gears out there that is super durable, but then you look like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man in, you can't move in. So you're going to have to come to a compromise with you about durability versus breathability. Like my favorite set of athletic gear wears out more than the thick cotton sweatshirt. Why? Because this is designed for me to work in, but it will wear out faster than some other ones. But in general, if you take care of your gear, that's the biggest problem I would address. Number one, don't lay it out in the sunlight. Don't have your bays where your gear's in open storage rack with the sun hitting it. UV damage kills gear. Don't let the plowing of it blast it with exhaust and all that. And then take care of your gear. If your fire department allows you to have 2 sets of gear, which some do, then you need to have a set of clean gear at the ready. And then your gear that comes out of that fire should be immediately washed, deconned, and you put a clean set on that truck and decon the area you're in. So if you want the gear to last longer durability, number one issue is firefighters need to learn to take care of it. I see more firefighters trash their gear and their face piece and then complain about it when it fails. If you don't take care of it, it won't take care of you. But in general, you can build gear tougher and more durable, but is not as ergonomic, and it will not breathe as well as some gear that is designed to be more ergonomic, have better breathability, like lower RET value. And you're going to have to sacrifice on some ends of things, just like there is no perfect thermal imaging camera. But you need to understand that gear that is breathable is still durable. The difference is what limits its durability. The person wearing it, how it's cared for, and do they understand how to care for it? Read the studies and how it should be cared for. That would be a good starting point of how it's washed, how it's dried, what you do, what you don't do. And more importantly, don't leave that stuff out in the sun like I talked about. I see that more often than not. UV degradation is kryptonite to gear. Great question.
Thanks. I have one more right now, and I think it's a question for our Fire-Dex product development. But
All right.
can we answer what's the TPP of the composites of the vapor light panels? Sean, if we can answer that.
Yep, that's a great question. So if you remember back to the slide that Andy showed where there are different thermal layers. So basically Aeroflex has different composites happening within the same garment. So the thermal layer can be, one thing in the core, and then the vapor light panels, you are always going to get core CXP1 layer. And that mixes with TechGen 71. So the TPP of those panels is 37.5. Coincidentally, this is also the same TPP that Andy has had in his entire ensemble since 2019.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I'm getting a couple questions about the recording. Yes, it will be available. We'll send out an email to everyone registered either later today or tomorrow. We'll give another second if there's any last minute questions, but that's all I'm seeing right now. Okay, I think we're good.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for the opportunity. And like I said, if you have any questions for Fire-Dex, you can send them directly to them. If you have any questions for me, you want to talk offline, my email is andystarnes@instructorandystarnes.com. Or you can go to my website, insighttrainingllc.com, and hit the contact us button. Just send us a message. We get those instantly. I appreciate your time, and stay safe out there, and God bless.